Jaya Radha
Om Namo Bhagavate
Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki Omagyanati Mirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Umilitam Yana Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanande Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachari Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pachitara Shikari Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Chakapatanu Yascha Kripasinu Vecham Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavim Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Hare. Krishna devotees, today we are reading from the Srimad-Bhāgavatam, 3rd canto, 28th chapter, text, no, 19th chapter, text 28. Please repeat after me. Yam yogino yaga samadhina raho.
Yam yogino yoga samadhina raho.
Jayanti lingat asato mukshaya.
Jayanti lingat asato mukshaya.
Tasyaya shadaitya rishabha palahato.
Tasyaya sadaitya rishabha palahato.
Mukhan prabhyams tanum utsarjana.
Mukhan prabhyams tanum utsarjana.
Yam yogino yoga samadhina raho.
Yoga samadhina raho.
Jayanti lingat asato mukshaya.
Jayanti lingat asato mukshaya.
Tasyaya shadaitya rishabha palahato. Prabhyams tanum utsarjaham. Yam yogino yoga samadhina raho. Jayanti lingat asato mumukshayam. Tasyaya shadaitya rishabha padahato. Mukham prabhyams tanum utsarjaham. Yam yogino yoga samadhina raho. Jayanti lingat asato mumukshayam. Tasyaya shadaitya rishabha padahato. Mukham prabhyams tanum utsarjaham. Yam yogino yoga samadhina raho. Jayanti lingat asato mumukshayam. Mukham prabhyams tanum utsarjaham. Yam yogino yoga samadhina raho. Jayanti lingat asato mumukshayam. Tasyaya shadaitya rishabha padahato. That's good. Mukham prabhyams tanum utsarjaham. Yam yogino yoga samadhinaraho. Jayanti lingal asado mumukshayam. Mukham prapasyam stanumutsarjaha. Yam yogino yoga samadhinaraho. Jayanti lingal asado mumukshayam. Tasyai sadaitya rishava padahato. Mukham pravasyam stanum utsasarjam. Wow, everybody did it. Hariva! Very auspicious. Synonyms. Yam, whom? Yoginaham, the yogis. Yoga samadhina, in mystic trance. Rahaham, in seclusion. Dhyayanti, meditate upon. Lingat, from the body. Asataha, unreal. Mumukshaya, seeking freedom. Tasya, of him. Eshaha, this. Daitya, son of Diti. Rishabha, the crest jewel. Pada, by a foot. Ahataha, struck. Mukham, countenance. Prapashyan, while gazing on. Tanum, the body. Utsarja, he cast off. Ha, indeed. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Brahma continued. He was struck by a forefoot of the Lord, whom yogis seeking freedom from their unreal material bodies meditate upon in seclusion, in mystic trance. While gazing on his countenance, this crest jewel of Diti's sons has cast off his mortal coil. Purport. The process of yoga is very clearly described in this verse of Srimad-Bhāgavatam. It is said here that the ultimate end of the yogis and mystics who perform meditation is to get rid of this material body. Therefore, they meditate in secluded places to attain yogic trance. Yoga has to be performed in a secluded place, not in public or in a demonstration on a stage, as nowadays practiced by many so-called yogis. Real yoga aims at ridding one of the material body. Yoga practice is not intended to keep the body fit and young. Such advertisements of so-called yoga are not approved by any standard method. Particularly mentioned in this verse is the word yam, or unto whom, indicating that meditation should be targeted on the personality of Godhead. Even if one concentrates his mind on the bore form of the Lord, that is also yoga. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, one who concentrates his mind constantly in meditation upon the personality of Godhead, in one of his many varieties of forms, is the first-class yogi. And he can very easily attain trance simply by meditating upon the form of the Lord. If one is able to continue such meditation on the Lord's form at the time of one's death, one is liberated from this mortal body and is transferred to the kingdom of God. This opportunity was given to the demon by the Lord, and therefore Brahma and other demigods were astonished. In other words, the perfection of yoga practice can be attained by a demon also, if he is simply kicked by the Lord. Again, the translation. Brahma continued. He was struck by a forefoot of the Lord, whom yogis, seeking freedom from their unreal material bodies, meditate upon in seclusion in mystic trance. While gazing on his countenance, this crest jewel of deity's sons has cast off his mortal coil. Before I start speaking, I'm seeking for the blessings of the Vaishnavas and especially of the senior-most ones, so that I can say something truthful and substantial. Thank you very much. So in this verse, Srila Prabhupada is speaking about the mystical yoga system, or that which everybody knows as yoga. If you go out on the street and you meet people, and whoever knows about yoga, he will probably give you an explanation that the yoga is, you do some positions, some breathing, some gymnastics, and that's it. Everybody knows about this yoga. And probably many of us, we have been introduced to it also, or even joined the Krishna consciousness movement through it, like myself. So it's one of the yoga systems which is explained in the Bhagavad Gita by Krishna directly to Arjuna, and it's very important to. Thank you very much, sir. Very beautiful. It's important to understand all the limbs, because it's called the eightfold yoga system, the Ashtanga, the eightfold mystical yoga system, because they can give us an insight of the technicalities of the whole process. Because Ashtanga yoga, as we know, and all the other types of yoga, they are actually nothing else but bhakti yoga. They are all included. All the other types of yoga, like karma yoga and jnana yoga, they are all dependent on bhakti. Without bhakti, there is nothing else. So I found a very nice text which is written by one very renowned scholar in ISKCON, Suhotra Maharaj, who explains the philosophy of yoga very nicely. So I wanted to read something from it, which will give us a very nice insight. So, yoga, or the self-discipline for self-realization. The word yoga is derived from the Sanskrit root yuj, which means to unite, or to connect, to reconnect. So this yoga system is providing methodology for linking our individual consciousness, of course, with the Supreme Consciousness. That is the unity. And the yoga system is actually known as this yoga system is known as the Patanjala yoga system. Does anybody know why? Why? Okay. Because this great sage, Patanjali, came to give us this yoga. But actually this sage was no other but Ananta Shesha himself. It was an incarnation of Ananta Shesha. There is a whole pastime behind it, and I didn't look into it so much. But it's there to be known. And it's closely allied to the Sankhya philosophy. It's similar. In the next chapters to come, we will be also overlooking the Sankhya philosophy of Kapiladev, who is explaining the Sankhya means counting the material elements, understanding all the elements of material nature. So in a way, yoga has similarities because it's also a mechanical control of the senses and understanding of the different parts of the mind and so forth, different items. And so this yoga system attempts to explain the nature of the mind and its modifications or its movements, so to say, which are impeding the growth and is afflicting. And the method for attaining is described as the highest goal of life, kaivalya, or to attain absoluteness. According to Patanjali, yoga is the control of the modifications of the subtle mental body. He proposes that the mental body leads a person to bondage or to liberation. So as we know, the mind is either our friend or our enemy. And that most human problems are mental. And that the only remedy to solve them is a mental discipline. Among all human instruments that serve one in attaining one's goals, the mental body is the finest. The mental body is also the link between consciousness and the gross physical body. For these reasons, Patanjali places great emphasis on the study of the mental body. His yoga system attempts to provide all possible means to control the mental body's modifications and unfold its great power for higher attainment. So even according to the Vedanta philosophy, this mental body is divided into 4 parts. The mind, the intelligence, the false ego, we hear them very frequently, but also there is a 4th part which is called the chitta, or the conditioned consciousness, the hard disk, or the storehouse of all the memories. So according to yoga, the mind is like a vast lake on the surface of which are many different kinds of waves. The waves of our thoughts. And deep within the mind is actually always calm and tranquil. But one's thought patterns steer it into activity and prevent it from realizing its own true nature. And something very interesting is that it is not very difficult to actually calm down the waves of thoughts, of thought patterns on the surface of the lake of the mind. So to say, the imminent desires, what is happening in the forefront of our mind. But it is actually very difficult to calm down those rhythmic and destructive waves of thought patterns that arise from the bottom or from the deep lower levels of the chitta, which are the memories, like which are like bombs buried in the lake bed of mind that explode at certain times and disturb the entire lake. And we know in Bhakti, we're speaking often about the stage of anartha nivritti. So these bombs are nothing else but all these anarthas which are stored in our chitta, in our hard disk. And we were discussing this in a previous lecture. This is why it happens so that even though you have joined and you have practiced for some years and everything is roses and flowers, you're chanting, you're feasting, and you're listening to all the lectures from the Swamis, and life is perfect, and then one day something comes up and you're like, what the hell is this? I thought everything was, finished. But all the luggage that we have accumulated in this life, what to speak in other lives, is coming up. It's coming up. Imagine desires that you had in your previous or even previous more life, which you weren't able to fulfill, maybe coming up now. Maybe. So the mind has 5 stages, which are understood by the mystic yogis. The mind is described as, and the 5 stages basically, they are the 5 levels of transparency of the mind, beginning from the first to the last, which is the most transparent. First stage is called kshipta, or disturbed mind. The second stage, the muddha, the stupefied mind. Then we have vikshipta, restless. And then we have the positive part, the ekagra, or one-pointed mind, when the mind is able to concentrate more. And finally, the well-controlled niruddha mind. So the predominance of rajas and tamas causes the mind to be disturbed, or kshipta. Because of the predominance of rajas, the mind becomes hyperactive. Because of the predominance of tamas, it loses its quality of discrimination. Thus, it flits from one object to another without resting on many. It is constantly disturbed by external stimuli, but it does not know how to discriminate what is beneficial from that which is useless. In the second stage, muddha, the mind is dominated by tamas, which is characterized by inertia, vice, ignorance, lethargy, and sleep. In this state, mind is so sluggish that it loses its capability to think properly and becomes negative and dull. In the restless stage, vikshipta, which is one level above, there is a predominance of rajas. And we also know this explanation of the passionate nature of the mind in the Bhagavad Gita, which is predominated by unlimited desires. So it's jumping from one desire to another. It's just an impetus to enjoy the material world. The vikshipta stage. The mind runs from one object to another but never stays anywhere consistently. This is an advanced stage of disturbed mind. These first 3 stages of mind are negative and act as impediments in the path of growth and exploration. So basically, these are the stages which are caused by the lower modes, by tamas and rajas, which are not very good options to stay into. And at this level, one experiences pain and misery and all kinds of unpleasant emotions. While the next 2 stages are more calm and peaceful. All the modifications are found in the earlier three stages. In the one-pointed and well-controlled states, there are no modifications at all. In the one-pointed state of mind, ekagra, there is a predominance of sattva, the light aspect of prakriti. This is a tranquil state near to complete stillness, in which the real nature of things is revealed. The fourth state is conducive to concentration, and the aim of the yoga system is to develop or maintain this state of mind as long and as consistently as possible. In the well-controlled state of mind, niruddha, there is no disturbance at all, but a pure manifestation of sattvic energy. In this state, consciousness reflects its purity and entirely into the mirror of the mind. And one becomes capable of exploring one's true nature. Only the last two stages of mind are positive and helpful for meditation. And many yogic practices are designed to help one attain these states. When all the modifications cease and the state of stillness is acquired, the Purusha, pure consciousness, sees its real nature reflecting from the screen of the mind. So here it speaks a little bit about these modifications. There are 5 classes: valid cognition, invalid cognition. Okay, I won't go so much into this. The modifications of the mind are caused by 9 conditions or impediments, namely sickness, incompetence, doubt, delusion, sloth, non-abstention, confusion, non-attainment of the desired state, and instability in an attained state. These impediments disturb the mind and produce sorrow, dejection, restlessness, and an unrhythmic breathing pattern. So yoga provides a method for overcoming these problems and controlling the modifications of the mind. Patanjali states that the mind and its modifications can be controlled through practice, abhyas, and detachment, vairagya. The mind is said to be like a river that flows between 2 banks. One bank is positive and is the basis of liberation, while the other bank is negative and is the basis for indiscrimination and infatuations with sense objects. When the current of the river is controlled by the practice and detachment, it tends to flow toward the side of liberation. And we know the practice is the 8 limbs. Does anybody know? How are the limbs? Yes. So I'll just go briefly through all of them, which are actually very important even for us, because we're also practicing these 8 limbs. Just like I was saying, it's included. So the yamas, or they are the 5 restraints: non-hurting, or ahimsa, non-violence; non-lying, satya; non-stealing, asteya; sensory control, brahmacharya; and non-possessiveness, aparigraha. And then we have the niyamas. So we have 5 restraints, 5 negatives, and 5 positives, or observances. Purity, shaucha; contentment, santosha; austerity, tapa; study, svadhyaya; and surrender, ishvara pranidhana. Very important aspect. Patanjali actually propounded a theistic yoga system, but unfortunately nowadays most of the practitioners are not theistic. They're missing on this point, ishvara pranidhana, surrender to Ishvara. And then, when one has mastered or observed these first 10 items, then one can proceed to asana, or yoga postures. After one has mastered the yoga postures, then pranayama, which is controlled vital force of the prana, apana, samana, udana, and vyana. These are the 5 main subtle airs that are moving the forces in the body. Not the force, they are the subtle forces that are moving the different processes in the body. Then we have pratyahara, which is a withdrawal of the senses. Then dharana, concentration. Afterwards, dhyan, meditation. And then ultimately, samadhi, when one is able to clear all these patterns of thoughts, emotions, samskaras. When the mind becomes clear, one is able to see his true self. Success in yoga requires one-pointed and well-controlled mind free from all worldly desires. Attachment to worldly desires is the main cause of and is the direct evolute of ignorance, which produces all the modifications of the mind. According to Patanjali Yoga, attachment to world objects is the arch enemy of the individual who wants to understand his inner self. The necessary qualities and conditions for reaching the subtler levels of consciousness include willpower, discrimination, full control of the mind, conscious direction of one's potentials towards the desired end, a firm resolution to turn away from all worldly attachments, determination to obliterate the ego, control over all inharmonious processes, and constant awareness of the ultimate goal. So, I'll just briefly go through the 8 processes. So we have yama. The ahimsa principle means literally to non-injury or non-violence. Generally, one thinks of non-violence as merely restraining from the physical act of violence. But in yoga scriptures, non-violence is to be practiced in thought, speech, and action. That's something important to understand. Even in our thinking, we have to be careful what we're thinking, what's going on there, because then it will result in speech, maybe. We'll throw some curse at somebody and maybe punch him. It all starts in the mind. Satya. According to Patanjali Yoga, one should be truthful to oneself and to others in thought, speech, and action also. Again, the yoga student is taught to speak what he thinks and to do what he says. To speak what he thinks and to do what he says. But nowadays, hypocrisy is very, very predominant, and we find many times that people say something, but they don't do it. So naturally, when you're dealing with a person like this, there are no it's like this is the basic human relations, you don't know how to expect, how am I supposed to work with this person, He said he's coming tomorrow for the Harinam, but, how can I rely on him to give him some responsible service or to be teammates? So this crookedness, which is caused by our own conditioning, by the influence of Kali, it has to be eradicated. We have to become gentle women and gentle men. That's one of the foremost items of being gentle, woman or man. To speak straightforwardly and to live by our words. Sometimes one lies without awareness, or sometimes just for fun. Just for fun, yeah. Nice. Or for the sake of creating gossip. These simple lies are like seeds that create habits that will one day become one's nature. Thus one cannot even trust in himself because of his untruthful nature. The day a person becomes totally truthful, his whole life becomes successful, and whatever he says or thinks comes true. He gains inner strength through which he overcomes all fear in his life, just by being truthful. Asteya, non-stealing, provides a great opportunity for the practice of non-attachment and non-possessiveness. Actually, non-stealing is a negative explanation of contentment, because when one is self-satisfied, he is not tempted to desire other things. Again, I'll read this. Non-stealing is a negative desire, is a negative explanation of contentment. So when we are content, we are in the state of non-stealing. Because when one is self-satisfied, when the mind is satisfied, the austerity of the mind is to keep the mind satisfied, Prabhupada explains. He is not tempted to desire other things. So one is desiring other things because his mind is not satisfied. So then greed develops, and furthermore it aggravates to the point where one wants to steal. Just going around in the ashram and see something and let me just put it in the bag. That's it. It's mine. Such a person considers whatever he has as okay. I read this. The yoga system advised that non-stealing be practiced mentally, verbally, and physically. Again, an honest author writes original thoughts, and if some material is borrowed from others, the author honestly and respectfully gives reference. That is an example of non-stealing at the thought level. In the same way, non-stealing practice at every level of the personality helps maintain purity of life, and purity of life allows one to shine and grow in all dimensions. So purity in thoughts, purity in actions, how is it? Purity in thoughts, in actions, and ultimately that will give us the purity of total purity of consciousness. Brahmacharya, we all know pretty well what is brahmacharya. To act, it specifically means to act in Brahman. One whose life's actions are always executed in the consciousness of I am not this body. I am Brahman, Brahmacharya. It's called a brahmachari. The word brahmachari is commonly translated as sexual abstinence. Very interesting. So, brahmacharya means both I am Brahman, aham brahmasmi, and it also means to be sexually abstinent, because the sexual pleasure is the biggest stimuli in the material world, is the biggest sense gratification, and is the binding principle. Everybody is mad after sexual pleasure, which is existing in 8 forms. Gross sex, as we all know, but then there are subtle sex, so they have to be all eliminated, like contemplating and speaking, observing the form of the opposite sex, or flirting, all these things. They're all sex, subtle sex, which ultimately leads to gross sex. So brahmacharya, without brahmacharya, one cannot actually progress, because the consciousness remains into the lower region. So that's why ashram life, austerity, morning programs, cold showers, is all aimed to keep the mind free from lust, free from these thoughts. Aparigraha, non-possessiveness, is generally misunderstood to mean denying oneself of all material possessions. but actually it indicates an inward attitude rather than an outward behavior. The feeling of possessiveness is an expression of dissatisfaction, insecurity, attachment, and greed. One who strives his whole life to gain more and more worldly objects is never satisfied because that desire can never be quenched. One who is constantly greedy for more forgets that it is impossible to eat more than the stomach can hold, to sleep more on the ground than the body covers, or to wear more clothes than the body requires. Whatever one possesses that exceeds the essential requirements becomes a burden, and instead of enjoying it, one suffers in watching and taking care of it. So simple living, high thinking. The more things we have, the more things we have to think about, and especially money. When one has a lot of money, a lot of riches, when he goes to sleep at night, he has to think, oh, my money in my bank, I have to make the deal because the dollar is going down, the euro is also fluctuating, I have to change the currency, I'll lose, So very important. Niyamas, all the observances. Shaucha. In the concept of yoga science, shaucha refers to both physical and mental purity. Chanting Hare Krishna, mental purity, and keeping the body clean, taking showers, bathing nicely, cleaning all the parts, don't forget behind the ears and, all the difficult places. Preferably for the boys, keep the hair at least short, because Prabhupada said in a public interview, even they were asking him, why are you shaving your head? Prabhupada said, just for cleanliness purposes. Very practical, and keep yourself clean. It's very, very favorable. Santosh, contentment, is a mental state in which even a beggar can live like a king. Can you imagine? Just by a little bit of understanding the yoga philosophy and a little bit of practice, and you can live like a king, as a beggar. It's one's own desires that make one a mental beggar and keep one from being tranquil within. Contentment does not mean one should be passive or inactive. For practice of contentment must be coordinated with selfless action. Yukta Vairagya. Tapas. The word tapas literally means the generation of heat. A yogi who burns with the zeal of austerity is able to generate heat from within his body that keeps him warm and fit even in the icy wastes of the Himalayas. That's how our Bhaktarayan keeps himself warm and goes around barefoot everywhere. Now we know how he does it. Therefore, tapas is not to be understood as self-torture. The Bhagavad Gita clearly states that yoga is not for one who indulges in the flesh, nor for one who tortures it. One who is a real yogi enthusiastically takes up a life of healthy asceticism. He may thus gradually unlock mystical powers within himself. But these powers, the yogi is able to easily withstand intense cold or go for long periods of time without eating, drinking, or even breathing. But until such powers are unlocked, it is useless to try to imitate the accomplishment of tapas. Actually, the supernatural powers are not the goal of tapas. The real goal is the development of sincere enthusiasm for a life of austerity. We know that these are deviations from the real path. We don't endeavor for this. Mystical powers. Svadhyaya includes studying the scriptures, hearing from the saints and sages, and observing lessons of experience through the eyes of spiritual revelation. Proper Svadhyaya requires discrimination, which means neither blind acceptance nor critical analysis of the sources of knowledge. So neither blindly accepting everything, but neither also being too challenging and too doubtful. It's not healthy. So one has to be balanced in his study of the scriptures. And then ultimately Ishvara Pranidhana. Surrender to the Supreme Being is the best method for protecting oneself from dangers of attachment, false identification, and the idea of I am the doer. Surrender is possible through cultivation of faith and devotion to the Lord within the heart. Okay, took a lot of time reading all these things. So the asanas, then after, these are the yamas and niyamas. Then one progresses to the asanas, which are helping the physical body ensure the physical health and mental harmony. They are used in conjunction with the yamas and the niyamas and the other limbs of Patanjali Yoga. For without the other elements of the system, mere physical exercise cannot provide the desired benefits. Nowadays, because many so-called students of yoga do not understand the importance of mastering the yamas and niyamas, before attempting the asanas, the yogic postures have largely degenerated into mere physical culture. So most of these people who are practicing yoga nowadays, they are doing just some gymnastics. There are postures for physical well-being and postures for meditation. So the bhakti yogis can use yoga for maintaining health much better than taking allopathic medicine and vaccines, whatnot. Much better. We have the original way of taking care of the body. Pranayama control the vital force. The student becomes aware of a deeper level of personality, pran, the life force, functioning in the body. The word pran is derived from the Sanskrit root an and the prefix pra. Ana means to animate, vibrate, and pra means first unit. Thus the word prana means the first unit of energy. Whatever animates or moves is an expression of prana. And prana is within air, within us, within the food. So by doing pranayama, one actually becomes healthier and stills the mind and regulates all the different subtle airs like apana, samana. Apana is the excretory vital force, samana is the digestive assimilating force, udana is the energy that uplifts, causes contraction in thoracic muscles, for the speaking, upana, vyana. Vyana is all the processes of the muscles, the ligaments. Imagine just by breathing, by doing pranayama, how powerful it is. It actually purifies the entire body and slackens all the problems. Then we have pratyahara, withdrawal of the senses. When we remove the senses from the external activities, sight, touch, taste, and so forth. Because the senses are always wandering from one object to another, and the mind also wanders with them. So one has to control the senses in this way. Then we have dharana, concentration. When one withdraws the senses and the mind from external objects, the mind must then carry a single thought pattern in a desired direction. Concentration, the sixth limb of yoga, is a process through which one withdraws the mind from all directions and focuses its powers to further journey inward. So we have focus and then dhyana. Then after this focus, one develops the meditation, or one becomes able to dwell more on the subject matter, which is Krishna, of course. Meditation is an advanced state of concentration in which one single object of concentration's flow interrupted. In this state, the mind becomes fully one-pointed, and by one-pointedness, the yogi can approach the super soul. And then samadhi. After a prolonged meditation on the super soul, one attains a spiritual absorption. The word samadhi is closely related to the word samahitam, which means the state in which all questions are answered, or the state in which one is established in one's true nature. Out of curiosity regarding the basic questions that the mind wants to solve, the mind flits from one thought to another and becomes restless. But the moment the mind resolves its curiosity, it has no reason to wander here and there, and thus it naturally establishes itself in its true nature. Samadhi is a state beyond thinking and feeling in which the individual soul is linked with the Supreme Soul. In Samadhi, one casts away all limitations and causations and enjoys eternal bliss and happiness. It is not a state of a dissolution of individuality. Yogis know Samadhi as a mystical fulfillment of individuality. In different yoga traditions, this state is called soundless sound, the state of silence, or the highest state of peace and happiness. There are two stages of Samadhi, Sabij and Nirbij. Sabij Samadhi, this is very important here to understand. Sabij Samadhi means Samadhi with seeds. In this state, the sense of individual interest separate from the super soul is retained, and the seed of desire and attachment still remains in latent form. In this state of Nirbij, or seedless Samadhi, however, the individual consciousness is completely unified with the Supreme Soul. This may be understood in two ways. The yogi surrenders all separate interest and serves only the interests of the Paramatma. He becomes a pure devotee of God, and by the Lord's mercy gains entry into the eternal spiritual realm, Vaikuntha. But if the yogi identifies with the Paramatma as his own self, he is absorbed into the body of the Lord. This is called Ishvara Sayujya, merging into the Supreme Lord Vishnu. So basically, when the yogi comes to the point where he realizes Paramatma, he has two choices. He can either surrender to Paramatma, or he can look at Paramatma as some kind of a source of his power and merge in himself. So this is the main difference, that this Sabij, or how is it? Sabij or Nirbij is that one either becomes a devotee or one becomes a Mayavadi, impersonalist, who merges into the impersonal Brahman. And that is not good. And yes, so the last thing. So the Bhakti Yogis, what we can take away from this explanations of all these things, we are actually, by studying Bhakti Yoga and by understanding the Bhagavad Gita, the Bhakti Yogis, they are actually the masters of yoga, and they can use it. They can use this knowledge. They can use it for preaching, for example. We can teach all these people who think they're doing something. We can easily use this as our advantage to explain to them what are all the subtleties of yoga and what is the actual purpose. And fortunately nowadays we already have many devotees who are preaching through yoga, and they are actually able to give the full benefit to people. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Yoginam api sarvesham madgatenantar atmana shadavam bhajate yomam same yukta tamo mataha. Of all yogis, one who with great faith, one with great faith who abides always in me, thinks of me within himself, or renders transcendental loving service unto me, he is the most intimately united with me in yoga, and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. So this is the ultimate verdict of the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna himself is explaining that the Bhakti yogis, those who practice Bhakti, they are actually the topmost yogis, because they don't just meditate on the Paramatma or some other minor form, or just speculatingly try to stop their thoughts or meditate on the void or some other invented process, but they actually meditate on the real substance, which is Krishna himself. And Prabhupada was also explaining here about secluded place. The yoga, mystical yoga is obviously practiced in a secluded place, either in the mountains or in the forest. But for us, the secluded place is in the ashram, in the company of other devotees, especially seniors in their association, which is giving us shelter. And yes, Krishna also says this verse in the Gita, Antakale chamam evasmaram mukfa kalevaram yaprayati samadbhavam yati nasti atra samshayaha. Whoever at the end of his life quits his body remembering me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. So this is the confirmation of the last part of the Patanjala that we were reading, that one has to become absorbed into samadhi, one has to remember Krishna at the time of his death. Otherwise, one won't be able to transcend the material world. That's why what we are doing basically is we are trying to purify all these modifications, how Maharaj was explaining, how was he explaining all these disturbances in the mind, all these false impressions. We are trying to dissolve them in the fire of bhakti, which means that we are staying in the association of devotees. We are having actually positive impressions, which will overwrite our conditionings, our previous anarthas. Just like we used to enjoy the world and all these very powerful stimulations of sense gratification, like even taking drugs or becoming successful in the world. These are all these memories which are lying there, and we are always remembering these things. They all come up. But when we have spiritual samskaras, so to say, when we have spiritual impressions, when we do festivals together like Ratha Yatra, or go to the Holy Dham, or have very nice friendship in Krishna consciousness, all these things together, when they become saturated, they actually spiritualize our consciousness, our mind, and in the end we are able to always remember Krishna. So that's the challenge, to keep the mind full with Krishna and all of his variegatedness, instead of filling our minds with nonsense, with prajalpa and material sense gratification. And last thing, Prabhupada was explaining how one is also able to attain liberation also through inimical behavior. Just like the demon, he was against Krishna, like many other demons, and Krishna killed him. He placed his foot on his head or kicked him, and in this way Krishna is actually favoring. So he also got liberation. So you can go also the other way. You can become enemy of Krishna, and Krishna will liberate you again also. That's also a possibility, but it's not recommended. And those who are actually the biggest losers are those who ignore God, who are completely impersonal. Those who are enemies of God, they are actually favored because they remember God, and then they can even become purified at one point. Like this. This is what I wanted to say, and sorry for going over time. It's 9:10 already. I don't know if somebody has a small question or comment.
Just what is the evidence that the Patanjali is the incarnation of meditation?
Yeah, what is the evidence? I'm Yeah, there is no reference here, but in the Puranas, there is something. I read a pastime somewhere on the internet. I think there is a pastime. I think.
I think actually in chapter 11 of Bhagavatam,
Yeah,
the
maybe
first
even in
canto where he's
Bhagavatam.
listing Krishna as the source of incarnations, that chapter, Patanjali is even listed as one of the
Yeah, yeah.
like Amsa or partial incarnations in that chapter. But I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure I saw it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there are more details also in the Puranas. There is the pastime where somebody went to Mahavishnu and requested him for something, and from there Ananta Shesha came forward and incarnated as Patanjali and gave the yoga system. We can look it up.
Thank you for the class, it was really good. Also because I was just talking with some devotee about this yesterday, so Bhagavatam class always aligns with whatever you're thinking about. Perhaps you could say more about, so in order to attain that stage of prema, for example, when we talk about prema, first we have to go through that stage of dhyana, concentration, meditation, samadhi, before the stage of prema even becomes available, before it even opens up to us. And at that point, what does it mean to choose, what does it mean to reach that stage and choose to meditate on yourself rather than to choose to meditate on the Supreme? I don't know if I fully understand.
Yeah. No, it's a good question because I was actually explaining this is the yoga philosophy, which is not some it's in line with bhakti yoga also, but we don't endeavor separately. We don't mechanically try to control our senses. This is for the yogis who they start from the bottom. But the bhakti yogis, they hear about Krishna, they have the experience, the direct experience. So our process is we just do stuff for Krishna. So that's our main thing, and all these things they're already included, so to say, and one can look at them separately. They can be helpful to understand the process, to understand how the mind works. For example, the different stages of the mind. But for the bhakti yogi, ultimately, he has to just remember Krishna and do practical service for him. And he can use also whatever is there that is helpful, that is supportive, just like yoga can be used for health. But all these things, they're not necessarily mandatory to study and to understand how exactly the process works. And the bhakti yogi doesn't need to make that choice, either to merge into Krishna or to surrender at the point of samadhi. But because he has already understood yoginam api sarveshram, this is the bhakti yogi. Bhakti yogi is already here, but the Ashtanga yogi, he starts from. Yeah, because the desire of the Ashtanga yogi maybe initially is, I want mystic powers. So this is the process. You have to do this. But for the bhakti yogi, you just engage in direct devotional service, and by engaging in the sadhana bhakti process, one naturally attains these stages.
The bhakti practices are actually for liberated people already, right? In a way, right? Some like these first Goswamis were already liberated, fully liberated. Like when Santana Goswami comes to Chaitanya, he's already fully liberated. He's like, well, what are the activities of fully liberated person?
Oh, bhakti is for everybody.
Yeah, it's for everybody, but it's like the actual activities are also for liberated people too. So
Yeah.
if we're not liberated, we still do the activities. When we become liberated, it's still the same. We
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, because the service is at a higher level than
yeah,
the yoga
yeah,
systems.
yeah. Because the bhakti yogi, he goes immediately to transcendence, but the other philosophical systems, they approach transcendence through like even jnana yoga, speculation and gradual, step by step ladder, so to say, and yeah. That's it. Grantaraj Srimad-Bhāgavatam ki jai. Take over, Premanandi.
Matanga Prabhu ki, thank you.
Srila Prabhupada ki. Thank you.